Hello, and thank you for tuning in to Ask the Gluten Free Chef. I'm your host, Calvin, and I'm here to answer your questions about celiac disease, gluten free living, and gluten free eating. To learn more information on how you too can live a simple, happy, and healthy gluten free lifestyle, follow my food blog at theglutenfreechefblog.com or follow me on Twitter at glutenfreechef5 and like me on Facebook at the Gluten Free Chef blog by Calvin Eaton. We're also found on Stitcher, and you can also review and like this podcast over at iTunes. Let's jump right into this week's episode. So I thought that I'd take a rather simple yet at the same time loaded question for this week's episode. So many people who are diagnosed with celiac disease are just, I think, people in general who may not know a whole lot about the illness, often wonder what exactly you can eat, because so often, if you do know someone who has celiac disease, they're always talking about they can't eat this or they can't eat that. So that then, therefore, begs the question, what foods are gluten-free? And for someone like myself who is a chef and a foodie and someone who has been celiac for quite some years now, it seems like a pretty straightforward question, and yet this is the one that I'm asked the most from people who are just really unfamiliar and don't have a lot of knowledge about gluten-free foods and celiac disease. They always say, well, what foods are gluten-free? And pretty much to answer that question, and keep it as simple as possible, but at the same time, not making it too convoluted, I like to tell people that when you're talking about what foods are specifically gluten-free, anything that's, or maybe I shouldn't say anything, but you want to look at whole, natural foods. So most vegetables, such as, carrots, broccoli, cauliflower, eggplant, anything like that is gluten-free. The most common foods that you pretty much eat on a daily basis, apples, bananas, blueberries, raspberries, those are all naturally gluten-free foods. So for the most part, you're safe when you're talking about eating whole, real foods, things that you can grow in your garden. I just got my garden in last week and we planted cabbage, we planted kale, hot peppers, bell peppers, cucumber, scallions. Those types of things are natural. They're whole foods, fruits and vegetables, oranges, tangerines, melons, cantaloupe. All of these foods are gluten-free. If you're someone who does eat meat and or dairy, milk is a naturally gluten-free food. I'm thinking of some other things. Anything like an orange juice, those types of things are naturally gluten-free, especially if you're juicing it yourself. When you really start to get into trouble is when you're looking at your more processed foods. So all the foods that you go into the grocery store and you see on the shelf or you see in the freezer case, those processed types of foods, as long as they're a natural food, you pretty much are safe, but you have to, or I shouldn't say a natural food, but something that's a whole, real fruit or vegetable, something that's maybe frozen, like frozen broccoli or frozen carrots, or canned foods. You really have to look at how it's been processed. Sometimes processing plants for, even when they're cutting up like strawberries to put into a freezer bag or something like that, freeze-dried strawberries, you have to look at whether it's been processed on a piece of equipment or in a facility that also processes foods that contain gluten. So that's where you really want to pay attention to what the packaging is saying. Is this item being processed in a facility that also processes wheat? And if you are someone who is extremely sensitive, then you might want to shy away from that food if it has that gluten, even if it has that gluten-free label on it, because you have to really be careful with the cross-contamination. It gets really murky with processed foods because sometimes all the things that I've mentioned thus far and many, many others, you think, for instance, ketchup ketchup is made from tomatoes. There might be a little sugar in it, maybe some salt, and you think, okay, this is gluten free, but you have to be careful because all brands are not created equal, and some brands, if they're using some type of preservative or what they call natural flavoring, those types of things, or even artificial flavorings, those could be hidden sources of wheat. I think Heinz ketchup specifically says on its bottle that it's gluten free, so that tells me that this company, because they had that gluten free label on it, they're saying that this food is not processed in a facility that processes grains or foods that contain gluten. And also there's no type of a hidden preservative or natural flavor that might contain a trace source of wheat. With that being said, when you're going gluten-free, or if you're newly diagnosed celiac, you really start to run into trouble when you're talking about eating certain things like cereals or hot cereals. And then really your grains. The biggest question is what grains are gluten-free, because wheat is a grain and it is in so many different types of processed foods, from dry mixes, to flavoring mixes, those types of things. And you really have to be careful when you're looking at things that are dry or dry grains. So naturally occurring gluten-free grains include corn, rice, buckwheat, which is actually a misnomer. Buckwheat is actually gluten-free. I'm thinking of some other things. Tapioca, which makes tapioca starch or tapioca flour. Sorghum is a gluten-free grain that a lot of people don't know about. You can buy different types of soy flours, chickpea flours that are gluten-free. Almond flour is gluten-free. Coconut flour is gluten-free. I'm thinking of some others. There's peanut flour that are in some gluten-free all-purpose blend mixes. The ones that I use the most are corn, tapioca starch, white rice flour or brown rice flour. I'm thinking xanthan gum, which is the extraction. It's a substance that's used in gluten-free all-purpose mixes to give the baked item that like chew, or that light and airy consistency that is a property of wheat flour and many of the baked goods that most of us have loved and enjoyed for many, many years before we had to change our diet because we got that celiac diagnosis. Those are the naturally occurring gluten-free grains. Quinoa is another one. Most all beans, legumes are gluten-free, so you're talking about things like pinto beans or black beans or white beans or cannellini beans. All of these types of things are gluten-free. So when you're looking at it from this perspective, there are a lot of foods that are gluten-free, and you have a wide range of items that you can choose from. I think the biggest problem is that because we live in such a processed world, and for many of us who have families and you're cooking for small children, you might not always be cooking every single thing from scratch. And so when you're starting to buy some of the freezer meals and those types of things, that's when you have to be more careful and take more consideration and really scrutinize the back of that food label, looking at the list of ingredients, looking at where it's being processed, to make sure that you're not accidentally ingesting any source of hidden wheat in those processed items. There's a big confusion always, I know, with like oatmeal. Oats is a naturally occurring gluten-free grain. What happens with oats is that a lot of times at the farming level or at the crop level, sometimes an oat field is near a wheat field, and so that cross-breeding at that level can happen between the oat grain and the wheat grain, and sometimes the oats can be contaminated at the growing source or in the field level. So if you're buying oats, make sure that you're buying them from a organization or brand that specifically is saying that these oats are certified gluten-free. Like Bob's Red Mill and other grains and other companies that are sure that their products are sourced and grown at a level that there is no cross-contamination, or that their facility is a gluten-free facility. So I hope that this was helpful in you just kind of understanding some of the nuances of the different foods that, for the most part, there's a wide range of things that you are able to eat. And I think because celiac disease, that diagnosis changes so much of our lifestyle, especially at the beginning, and how we eat and what we eat is such an integral part of everyone's lifestyle. It a lot of times seems like there's nothing you can eat and that it takes a long time to figure out how to look at labels and how to check the back of ingredients and those types of things. But if you are positive about it, you really see that you have a wide range of foods that are actually gluten-free. I know for me, just being someone who likes to cook and who has developed that love over time, having a celiac diagnosis has really opened up my palate and my view on different types of foods. Things that I love now, like the different beans that I love, chickpeas and black beans and quinoa, sorghum flour. Those are things that I didn't know anything about 7 years ago. I didn't know what quinoa was, and I for sure wasn't cooking with it. But now, since I'm going gluten-free and having celiac disease, and now, really being forced because of my health to sustain this gluten-free lifestyle, I now eat a large variety of foods that I would not normally have eaten. I know that I eat more plant-based now than I did many years ago, not only because of my celiac diagnosis, but just for the fact that you just start to really pay attention to how your food is sourced, where it's coming from. I've read a host of books about, the food industry and just the packing industry and the meat industry and all of that, and it just really opens up your mind and really helps you to appreciate, because we have such a wide variety of foods, you don't have to feel so limited in what you're eating. And a lot of times, many people are eating the same things every single day. And with celiac disease, you really have a lot of options that you might not have thought of or even considered before having that diagnosis. So I hope that this information was helpful in just helping you to appreciate that there are a lot of don'ts, but at the same time, there's a lot that you can have on your menu. And if you need any more suggestions on what foods are gluten-free and how to incorporate gluten-free foods into your daily food lifestyle or your daily diet, of course, you can visit the food blog, theglutenfreechefblog.com. I have a host of recipes, desserts, soups, salads, dinners that are all gluten-free and really use those whole, real ingredients. I don't use a lot of processed foods in my recipes, or really any processed foods at all for the most part. I'm really an advocate of using whole, real food in your meals and your meal plans, and cooking from scratch made simple. You don't have to spend hours upon hours in the kitchen, and you for sure can have tasty, delicious meals that are full of flavor when you're using different types of spices and different types of herbs, like basil and parsley, thyme, garlic. Those are the things that really add flavor and variety to your palate when you're cooking. You can also visit celiac.org, which is the Celiac Disease Foundation. They are in their 25th anniversary, and there's a whole host of gluten-free resources, information about celiac disease, how to get involved, how to advocate, how to live gluten-free. My blog is one of the blogs that's one of the official sites on the Celiac Disease Foundation. There are also other food blogs out there like Glenn's Kitchen Adventures and Elena's Pantry that help you really figure out what foods you can eat, and really putting together those meal plans that are grain-free, that are wheat-free, that are vegan-friendly and vegetarian-friendly. There's really a lot of information on the web and out there for how you can eat and live and enjoy your gluten-free living each and every day. So, for more information, again, visit my food blog, theglutenfreechefblog.com. You can also visit me on Twitter at GlutenFreeChef5 with the hashtag AskTheGlutenFreeChef to submit any of your questions that you'd like to hear in upcoming podcasts. You can also like me on Facebook at the Gluten Free Chef blog by Calvin Eaton, and we have our new Gmail account specifically dedicated for your questions for the Ask the Gluten Free Chef podcast at AskTheGlutenFreeChef@gmail.com. I look forward to future episodes with you, and I thank you for listening to this week's episode of Ask the Gluten Free Chef.